Hey everybody, welcome again to the Gen Well Project and our Connected Conversation series, a series of conversations that we launched at the start of COVID-19 in order to connect people with ideas, tips, tools, people and organizations that can help us all through these challenging times of COVID-19. And it's all part of the Gen Well Project, the human connection movement, whose mission is to educate the world about the importance of human connection in their lives, and more importantly, inspire each of us to actually take action. Because it's in that action where we can actually make a difference in the lives of ourselves, but maybe even more importantly, in the lives of others. Today, I'm really excited to have Amanda O'Rourke, the executive director of 880 Cities, to be part of a connected conversation. And I think the synergy between Amanda and the work we do, the work they do at 880 Cities and what we do at the Gen Well Project is so simple and so clear that creating infrastructure is powerful stuff. And they've done incredible work at 880 Cities around the world, but making sure that we educate society about the importance of human connection, something that none of us were ever educated on, could be the great 1-2 punch that we can all benefit from. 880 Cities is a nonprofit organization, and I want to get this correct, so I'm going to read it, which is bringing citizens together to enhance mobility in public spaces so we can create vibrant, healthy, and equitable communities. I don't know about you, but if I had a vision like that to wake up to every day in an organization, I'd be pretty inspired. I want to introduce Amanda with a proper bio as well. Amanda's been with 880 Cities since the beginning in 2007, which is pretty remarkable. She was a key architect of the 880 Cities concept and has held several positions within the organization. She's been a key driving force in the development and growth of 880 Cities and worked on numerous projects related to parks, public spaces, and sustainable transportation in North America, Europe, Mexico, and Australia. That sounds pretty incredible. Amanda holds a Master's of Science in Planning from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Biology from Queen's University. She's also the current co-chair of the Children's Play and Nature Committee for the World Urban Parks. She loves being a mama to 3 small kids and is an eternal optimist and is passionate about transforming cities into great places for all people. It is my pleasure to welcome Amanda O'Rourke to Connected Conversations. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Pete. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
Well, hey, I wish I had a bio like that because with that bio, it makes sense for you to be doing what you do. And obviously, the inspiration that you've provided behind 880 Cities is truly remarkable. And we're going to have a great conversation today about all that you do because I really do think that what you're doing is more important than ever before in actually giving people in these in the high dense cities, especially, the opportunity to get connected. So I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Me too.
Hey, quick question. We always do this before we have a conversation with our guests on Connected Conversations. We check in with them because oftentimes the people that are trying to help other people, whether they're frontline workers or in your case, people that are focused on trying to create the facilities, create the infrastructure that help people get connected, sometimes we forget about checking in with them. So I'd love to just say, hey, here we are 8-9 months into COVID-19. How are you doing? And how are you and your family and your work all holding up?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think you're absolutely right. It's important for us to check in with each other as human beings, right? Not just human doings. So I am feeling really grateful and lucky to be doing the work that I'm doing. I am working in my home, as everyone can see. As you mentioned in my bio, I have 3 kids, so I am currently in a 2-bedroom house with 3 kids and my partner. We're definitely making it stretch the space as much as possible. But I understand this sort of unprecedented, challenging time we're in. I'm juggling, the work life balance as best as I can. But grateful that my family is healthy and happy so far. So But thanks for the question.
No, I thank you for that response. It's a very similar response, and I'm not surprised the people who come on Connected Conversations are those that have that awareness that hey, if we're not worried about food, water, shelter, safety, or security, we're one of the lucky ones as we go through this challenging time. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for us all. And we launched a campaign back in May called Just One More. Hey, you're my one more today to check in and make sure that we're all doing okay, because a simple communication and reach out can make all the difference in the world right now. So let me ask you this. Tell us a little more, for those who are watching and who will catch this later on video. Tell us a little more about 880 Cities, a bit of the journey that you've been on since 2007, because I think it's a really great concept. And obviously, as one of the original ideators behind it, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on where you were, what was the inspiration, and where you are today.
Yeah, so 880 Cities was founded by Guillermo Peñalosa, or Gil Peñalosa, as he's known more so in Canada. Gil started his city building career actually in Bogota in Colombia, where he was commissioner of parks. And he, along with many others, including his brother, in the late 1990s, led an impressive transformation of that city through investments in parks and public spaces, in sustainable mobility, the world-renowned Ciclovia, which is a car-free Sunday that has been now widely emulated around the world, and sustainable transportation, including the bus rapid transit system. So Gil, when he later immigrated to Canada, started 880 Cities. Actually, it was called Walk and Bike for Life at that time, with that premise that kind of baked into the DNA of his inspiration was that he knew from his experience in Bogota that public space transformation could be a real driver for social equity outcomes and improving quality of life for the people in cities. And so he started an organization called Walk a Bike for Life. I met Gil soon after he started it. I was recently out of planning school and was inspired by his story and was one of the first project managers for 880 Cities. And Gil actually started a lot of his presentations talking about, we really focus on public space, walking, cycling, and public spaces as a focus of transforming cities and making them more accessible to people of all ages. And he had this sort of 880 rule that he talked about. So you build a bike lane, it better pass the 880 rule. You build a sidewalk, it better pass the 880 rule. So if you are 8-year-old or an 80-year-old, if it works for you, then it's going to work for everyone. And I just thought that this was such a fantastic idea and concept that it just made more sense for it to be kind of integral to the naming of the organization. And so we did a rebrand of the organization and called it 880 Cities. And since then, for the last 15 years, we've been challenging cities on the way they design, plan, and manage their parks and public spaces by asking that simple question: what if everything we did was great for an 8-year-old and an 8-year-old? And I think it really gets people thinking in a way that we know that sort of, the last 80 years, we've really been thinking much more about moving cars in cities than we have on the health and happiness of people, certainly much more on the health and happiness of children and older adults. And so people in a different mind frame or sort of opens their hearts and minds, we hope, to thinking about what's possible for the future of cities.
Honestly, Amanda, I could literally just listen to that story because I'm sure there's a longer version. I appreciate what you provided, but that is so inspiring. I have a couple questions that kind of came to mind. Was there something in Colombia when Gil started it? Was there something that led the city to finally take the leap, to finally push them to be what I will say is more proactive towards the health of their constituents? What was it that got them across that line? Because I think a lot of people think it's a great idea. Hey, that sounds really wonderful, but taking that initiative is the big step. And I just think it's amazing that he achieved that. And obviously, you've seen a lot of the great work you've done, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what was that? Was there a catalyst there that made that happen?
Yeah. Oh, the story of Bogota, we could talk for hours about it. It's such a fascinating example. It's been written about, documented. There's even a wonderful documentary narrated by Brad Pitt on Bogota change that I encourage folks to check out. But really the catalyst was, I think, city leadership. So there was a number of, Gil would tell you, Antanas Mocus, who was the mayor, where actually Gil, along with his brother Enrique Peñalosa, ran against Antanas in his election. And when Mocus won, he actually Gil was part of his administration. There's a great sort of backstory there of a personal connection. And Mocus was known for his sort of out of the box thinking. He was a professor. He really sort of focused on the human aspect of creating hope and change in a city that was at a time feeling kind of hopeless, and there was a lot of really negative stories about Bogota, and he really wanted to sort of change people's perception about their own city by focusing on human relationships and human connection. So that was kind of the impetus. And then along after Mocus was Enrique, who's this also very charismatic, amazing leader who really focused on bringing in the infrastructure elements. So huge investments in public transit, sort of building off of Mocus's reframing of the conversation in the city and bringing a bit more hopefulness and joy and sort of fun engagement into the city's sort of culture. Enrique really came with a very aggressive agenda of investing in sustainable transportation, public spaces, libraries, all the things that really help to build this social connection in the city, and still thrives to this day. Enrique was later voted in again. He just finished another term a few years ago.
Hey, that's a great story. So is the one word out of that whole story leadership?
I would say so. Yes, leadership and commitment. I think in our work, I always encourage people to approach this work not just with their heads, but with their hearts. And I think that's always whatever story of transformative change in a city. I think it ultimately comes down to leadership, whether it's political leadership or community leadership, or it comes down to someone who is really cares about something and is persistent and is almost like obsessed with making change.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting when you said head and thinking with your heart instead of your head, or maybe it's thinking with both of them. I thought, again, one of the things I often think is that we've had leaders, whether it's an MBA school or schools, we've been talking about Milton Friedman and capitalism, and so the heart hasn't really been a part of much of the thinking for a long time. And I think the times are changing. And I think that leads us into a question that, it's not the flow that maybe you were expecting in this conversation based on some of our earlier chats, but what do you think COVID-19 is going to do when you talk about head and heart and how people are going to start thinking? How do you think COVID-19 is going to impact? Maybe you can put it in the context of obviously 880 cities, but I think even more just in the context of how we as society start thinking about each other and the importance of community.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think one of the things that strikes me during this time that we're in amidst COVID is how much, and this is more personally, how much more engaged I feel with my local neighborhood and my neighbors, and I think that there's been a real sort of, with all of the nexus of these crises kind of coming at the same time. I mean, COVID really has exacerbated existing inequalities that we knew were there, that many organizations have been sort of pushing for improvements on for many years. But COVID has brought upon, I think, a moment of focus, a moment of collective focus, that we're all sort of focused on the same urgent crisis at the same time, while also being more engaged in our local neighborhoods, because we have to. This is where we are. We have to be at home. Our radius of influence has shrunk. I think it's forced us to kind of look around at where we are just in our vicinity, and my hope is that I think with this moment and this sort of realization and this potentially collective focus, that we can all come together, understanding the importance of a shared vision towards more equitable, more just, more climate friendly policies and programs and investments for cities. Maybe that sounds naive, but I think if it's not going to happen now, while everyone is sort of all focused on the same thing, and I think it may not happen at all. So I think we need to seize the moment and make sure that all of the investments that we make in cities and the direction that we're going are all focused on addressing these huge inequalities and these huge challenges that we're all facing as a society.
Well, I'll first say that in your bio, you said eternal optimist. So it was not naive for you to say that, because I wouldn't expect anything different from you. But I couldn't agree more with you. You know, if I look at all the challenges that we've faced, other than a war, which most people in our generation haven't experienced, the power of a war is unfortunately that you go through it with everybody else. We are all in it together. And I think, unlike the 2008 crash, unlike, other illnesses, SARS and other things, it really didn't impact everybody equally. And I think, and even though we're not all equally impacted by this pandemic, we are all impacted in one way, shape, or form. And I think that's a real powerful force of awakening for all of us, that, hey, if we don't get this thing right, and we also have to count on each other, which I think is another challenging part, is, at a time when we need to count on each other, I can't even come close to you to really have that engaging conversation, to understand each other and build that empathy and compassion. And I loved your comment about being locally engaged. We knew prior to COVID that 50% of Canadians didn't know their next door neighbor's name. And now I'll bet you many more know their neighbor, because in times of crisis, it's the people closest to us that can actually be there for us. Because your family who may live on the other side of town or on the other side of the world, can't be there. It's great to have those connections, and those are important. But that physical distanced hello to a neighbor or to somebody across the street when you're hammering the pots and pans for the frontline workers, or whatever the reason is, you're walking your dog, you're playing with your kids outside, those connections that we're having, because we're not rushing off to the next meeting and the next organized sport, are allowing us to actually connect deeper and more, and I'll say more meaningfully than we have in maybe a long time.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, I think, one of the things that I've been looking at lately is we know that natural disasters, pandemics have actually really influenced city planning for many years, for centuries, in fact. And actually, there's no doubt that COVID is accelerating change in cities. And I think my biggest goal right now, and my consistent message that I've been trying to share is that I think the future is what we want it to be. Is cities? We need to sort of make that choice. So if we choose to go down the path of fostering more inclusive cities, of creating more shared public spaces, actually inviting more public life into our cities, and investing in public space where people can meet each other as equals and build a sense of belonging. But we have to choose that. History shows us that if we don't make that a deliberate and intentional choice, we may lose the opportunity. 80 years ago, when cars started to populate cities, we kind of passively let that technology really dominate the way that we planned our cities, which really kind of drove us all into a more private sphere, and it actually declined our social infrastructure. So, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that we actually really push for this choice, and don't sort of passively sit back and let other forces, potentially more powerful forces, choose the future that we don't want. That's not actually centering people's health and wellness and human beings at the center.
Do you think that we're, like anything, when it's new, we get all excited about it? I'll even use technology in the current era, which is we're all excited about it until we wake up and recognize the impact that it's actually having us. And using your car example, we love the fact that we could get away from our homes and go out and see the great beyond. And now we recognize that what we've actually done is lost our community because we spend less time in the immediate space that prior to the car, your entire life was probably within 1 kilometer of your home, versus now we have the ability to be on the other side of the world in 24 hours. And obviously leading into the pandemic, we were, living fast-paced, distracted, and pressure-filled worlds. We were busy, flying, traveling, commuting. We were all over the place. And what we weren't doing, to your point, was building those healthy connection habits that make us all happier and healthier. Do you think that part of the pandemic is really about the awakening? It's not airy fairy type stuff. When I say awakening, it's really, did we need this? Because I've often I wrote a blog many years ago called The Great Reset, which I know is a term that a lot of people have used now. And it really is, I don't think we could have. We tried to get people to think differently. We tried to get people to say, slow down. We tried to get people to say, focus on, rising tides float all boat. Don't just worry about yourself. We've built bigger houses for smaller families and tall fences and in-home movie theaters and automatic garage doors. So we didn't have to talk to anybody. But now I think we're waking up and recognizing, hey, we actually do need each other. So is the pandemic, I hate to think that Mother Nature and God and whoever else might be up there from whatever religion and space, the universe came together and said, this is the only thing we can do to actually, create the awakening that may point us in that right direction.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to us choosing to go in the direction of fostering human connection and choosing to center human dignity in the way that we design our cities, in the way that we focus on infrastructure. So I think it's really about almost like a movement to kind of focus our attention towards that vision. I think also that there's a, I don't want to sort of romanticize the pandemic when it's certainly a lot of people are hurting right now.
Of course.
Yep. And that essentially acknowledge that our cities and our loved ones would not be taken care of, or our city would essentially not be functioning without the frontline workers and the essential workers who are putting themselves at risk for COVID. So I think we need to make the choice. I think we need like a strong movement towards centering human beings and human well-being at the center of how we make decisions about planning and planning our cities. And at the same time, acknowledging that our priorities really need to focus on those most vulnerable and those who are most being most hurt amidst all of these existing structural problems that are big and complex, but that they can be fixed. Like as I said, I'm an optimist. I wholly believe that any problem is one that can be solved if with enough heart and collective energy. We know that human beings are amazing at solving problems. We have through centuries. So yes, I think that it is potentially the pandemic is potentially a moment of reckoning and focus, but we have to make the choice. We need to be in the driver's seat of deciding that for our future.
Yeah, and just so you know, we only invite optimists onto Connected Conversations, so that's perfect. And trust me, it's great listening to you. Let me just, and it's before we jump into some other questions I have for you. I just want to ask you the question. This is what Gen Well is all about: is how do you think society understands how important human connection is to our lives, to our happiness, to our survival, to our longevity, to, building and strengthening the communities that make us, more resilient? Do you think people know the facts around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think people do. I think if you ask the average person, what makes you happy, what do you care about, what's important to you, you get the answers that kind of highlight the importance of the work that we're doing. They talk about how they feel pride in being engaged in their community. Maybe they work with their local community center or with a local faith group, or they do organizing on the community level, or they care about their local park, or they care about the library, or their family, that their family has all the things that they need to be safe and healthy and well. So I think, yes, people do. I think that the way that our society has been structured has been fraught with very unequal power dynamics, certainly through legacies of colonialism, which have, really exacerbated and concentrated power and wealth. But I think ultimately, which is why I'm so optimistic, people know what makes them happy. People know that being able to go outside and have access to nature and fresh air and sunlight, being able to move their bodies around makes them feel better. Maybe meeting up with a friend makes them feel better. Like, I think ultimately, like, we as human beings understand that about ourselves. It's just that a lot of other forces at play have really promoted a type of development that doesn't center human health and happiness, and it centers development that just is about the bottom line. It really creates an unequal playing field for private companies to sort of really be in the driver's seat and not in citizens to be able to really design their own destiny
Yeah.
in their communities.
It's interesting. I agree with you that I think, and I don't want to say unconsciously, but I think people understand that, when you spend time with people, are you happy? Of course, yes, we're all happy. We love doing it. But I know even research a couple months ago that showed out of Massachusetts General Hospital that the single largest action that all of us can take to avoid depression, as one example, is social connection. And even a couple weeks after that, our direct relation between isolation, loneliness, and type 2 diabetes. I think raising the importance of that social connection from just a casual, yes, I feel happier, to holy cow, this is as important as exercise and eating well and all the things that we've been educated on, could be a real compliment to everything that, we can get people out there. We can talk to people. We can set up the dates. But I think that just by educating the broader population, because I also think it's easy for us to actually point to the people that we work with in faith institutions. Those are the people who already get the importance of community. It's the rest of society that, that could probably benefit from a little greater knowledge, and also, close that gap between, the way the colonial history has set us up and where we need to get in order to create a world where everybody lives happier and healthier. Tell me on the stats on social infrastructure. You must have some stats that reinforce the benefits of creating those social infrastructure places in a community. What are the facts behind that on the benefits to the people that live in that community?
Oh gosh, how long do you have?
Yeah, I love it.
So one thing I did want to say before I go into that was I think education is really important, to your point, for sure. I also think that I think we need to kind of lure people back into the public realm and into more socially connected public spaces. I think there's only so far. We cannot lecture people out of car dependency. We need to kind of lure them into an improved quality of life, replace, from our experience in working on projects, you cannot replace car infrastructure with not particularly attractive pedestrian and cycling infrastructure and expect to get different results. You need to kind of lure people with irresistible infrastructure that really invites them out and engages them in all of their senses. So, painting a line on pavement is not going to make things click, but if you really actually employ the sort of rules of placemaking where you're engaging community members and layering different elements so that people can actually connect with each other, make eye contact, feel part of a shared space. That is important because education only goes so far if people can actually experience it and feel it.
Yeah.
So that is one piece. And then in terms of the science around social infrastructure and the benefits, there's a lot of research, and this has been documented widely around the benefits of even a simple walk outside, how that reduces stress levels. The patients that recover faster from surgery just from having a view of nature. There is a lot of research around the effects of social isolation right now, particularly among older adults, but it's not just an older adult phenomenon. It's actually really rising scarily among young people. And so having and creating spaces where people feel welcome and can build a sense of belonging has huge benefits to not only physical health, but mental health. The list goes on and on. We know that neighborhoods that have higher walkability scores, neighborhoods that have better access to parks and green space and shared community spaces like community centers and libraries have higher and better quality of life outcomes and metrics. So the science is there to support it. And I think also lived experience is there, and the stories are there to support it as well.
Yeah, I knew the answer to the question, obviously, because certainly the social isolation is something that we deal with at the GenWell Project all the time. But I know that, you know, all of those benefits are there for everyone to experience, and we just need to find the ways. And I think, you know, the work you do is one of the catalysts that will make it happen. So I know you've actually just recently. You won an award, but also you've done some amazing projects here in Toronto. But and I know that there's been work done around the world. How many countries have you done work in as 880 Cities?
Yeah, so I don't know how many countries. We've been in over 350 cities on all
Okay.
5 continents, but probably a lot of countries in there too.
Yeah.
But you know, our work has you know, we've been very fortunate. When Gil started 880, you know, 15 years ago, we started actually very focused locally, and then grew internationally, and have had the pleasure of working around the world. But also, I think when we turned 10, we decided we wanted to do more work back in our own backyard, and you know, take all this wonderful experience and learning from the cities that we have worked with abroad, and also try to have more impact locally. So that's actually been one of my goals, being now executive director. This is my 3rd year. One of my goals when I came in as ED after a few maternity leaves and kids and all that, was to have more impact locally. And we just yesterday received an award from the Ministry of Transportation for our really groundbreaking work on these demonstration projects that we did in 2019, where we pushed the city of Toronto to kind of think about their Vision Zero road safety goal, which is that no death on our street is acceptable, and 100% of those deaths are preventable through better design. And we wanted to demonstrate that through simple tactical interventions, volunteers, grassroots community efforts to reimagine our streets that focus and prioritize people moving rather than cars moving.
That's amazing. And here's a few pictures. Maybe you can speak to some of the pictures that we've put up on the screen, because I think most of these projects are in Toronto, Amanda. So do you want to tell us a little bit about these?
Yeah, thanks for showing the pictures. So the top left is us on the Danforth. This is Danforth Avenue, one of the busiest commercial streets in all of North America. And we were bold enough to say, we're going to transform this street in 29 hours with some temporary green paint. This paint is the paint that kids use in kindergarten class. It completely washes off. But we painted 2 separated cycle lanes. We built 2 parklets. One was a performance parklet where people could come and play music, and folks can gather around. We built mini trampolines on the street for kids to play and engage with the street in a different way. The street is for them too. We've built our streets thinking a lot more about, you know, 30-year-old athletic folks than we have on children and older adults and people with disabilities. We built also the bottom left corner a street mural to one of the things that we heard from community members before we did this project. We engaged the local BIA, of course, the local councillor, Brad Bradford, and the residents associations, and then did an engagement process with the community to find out what they wanted to see on their street. And one of the things was they wanted to see better crossing. So we actually built it in 29 hours with volunteers, and also collected data to see how travel patterns, and people behaved differently on the street. And we saw a huge increase in the number of children and older adults using the street. We had seating, people actually lingered and hung around. The local businesses were very happy to see people actually stopping and looking at what their store was and what it could offer. Many people said that they had noticed a business that they hadn't noticed before. So it was really about, re-envisioning the street as not just a street that would improve safety, but that would actually come alive with street life.
Yeah. I got a quick question that just comes from hearing that experience, which sounds truly amazing. Is what do you think the role of pop-up versus permanent is? Because I think for a lot of people, I know, some people need that catalyst, that inspiration, catalyst is the only word I can really think of that actually gets them to get out of the norm or to look at something differently. How do you guys look at, pop-up versus permanent infrastructure or change and the roles that they play? Is there one that's more positive or has better results than the other? I don't know if you can compare the two, but
Yeah, so the way that we see pop-ups is that they're actually a really effective engagement tool. So, I mean, one of the things that we do is try to think a lot more outside of the box and how we engage community in these conversations on, creating healthier and more active spaces. So if you host a town hall meeting at 7 p.m. about, creating a more complete street or reducing, improving road safety, you are not going to get generally, the single mom who works 2 jobs, or you're not going to get sort of the underrepresented voices in city building. So we really try to use pop-ups as a way to engage a broader audience in these discussions. We know that the traditional consultation really brings a very certain narrow demographic to those conversations, which then influences the city building decisions that are made. So if 10 people show up to a public consultation meeting and they all think that actually we don't want to see cycle tracks or these types of interventions on our street, that has a really strong influence on the planning approach. But if you actually do a pop-up where people of all ages and residents who would never usually show up to a traditional consultation meeting, don't have the time, but are doing their groceries or engaging in the street because that's what they use, they can actually have an input on the process, see what it looks like in real time, have an experience that may translate to a willingness to see the street in a new way and to see a project in a new way and open up minds to the possibilities. So that's really how we use pop-ups, is with an eye to being willing and humble with the response that you get too. So pop-ups are a tool, but if you hear back from community members that where there's pain points, we need to be responsive to what community members say about the impact of those projects. Those 3 were very positive. So we did the school street as well, which was outside of a school. We temporarily closed the street during drop-off and pickup to create a better environment for kids walking and biking to school. Also very positively received. But again, if we had come to the community saying we're going to close the street permanently and for a year, there might have been a lot of negative reaction to that. But what we came with was, we're going to try this for 4 days. We're going to see what you think about it. And then we're going to collect information and data, and that will inform a longer term project. And so for the example of the Danforth, this year, the influence of that pop-up really informed the development of that longer pilot that we now see along the Danforth, called Destination Danforth, which was done really quickly in the response to COVID, to create more space for people to be able to travel along the Danforth while maintaining physical distancing. So that was a great sort of almost future-proofing the street before COVID, and then giving an example that worked in real time.
I think that's brilliant. I love the idea of using the pop-up as a means to gather information, to trial it, to make sure you're getting connected to different communities. I think that's such a brilliant approach, because I love your example of the 7 p.m. Community meeting at the local school or at the local town hall gathering just isn't going to get the input that we need to be getting from all the various groups that are impacted by many of the things that we need to get done out there. How do you think, first off, I guess, who are you funded by in most of these cases? And then secondly, do you think COVID will have more people, whether that's corporates or governments, looking to find better ways and more ways to leverage your capabilities in building more, social infrastructure in cities around the world?
Yeah, so in the case of those pop-ups, we were funded actually by a private donor who lost someone close to her to road violence and wanted to do something to, in her words, make people's heads snap back a bit and wake up to which is a pedestrian fatality crisis that our city is facing and was facing. And so in that case, it was a private donor that in my 15 years of working with 880 cities, that was a once in a lifetime, I think, opportunity to do something really bold and ambitious, which was why we went big with those, because we know that those opportunities are few and far between. Generally, where we're funded as a nonprofit is through foundations and grants from government agencies focused on improving environmental sustainability and human connection in cities. And as well, we do work directly with cities. So we often are hired by municipalities to design inclusive engagement strategies through pop-ups, through unconventional kind of approaches to engaging folks in the future that they would like to see in their communities. And we do this with a really intentional approach on equity. And so we are often brought in on larger projects where we design the strategies for engaging a broader audience in these discussions, because ultimately we need this to be, to my previous statements, we need this to be a collective movement. Like we need a lot more diversity of voices and a lot more sort of like a lot more voices chiming in to this vision for a more 880, more inclusive city. I think in terms of will it change, certainly we've seen a lot of announcements from various levels of government, which those have been some, I think, bright spots on focusing on things like parks investment, sustainable mobility investment. So I'm very encouraged by the announcements from several levels of government in these important pieces. I also think I've also been very encouraged by some of the responses from cities who are using this kind of tactical approach in the COVID response. So we see that in the city of Toronto with their active CO, where they've used open streets as a way to provide opening up space for people to get out and exercise in a time when it's hard to do so. And there's not enough space to do so. So I've been encouraged also by the city's response of using this kind of tactical approach that we've been doing for many years with our open streets programs and with these kinds of pop-ups, and being responsive quickly due to the urgency of the situation we're dealing with.
And what role, and that's amazing. I love to hear that the governments are recognizing the work that you've already put in place, the infrastructure you've already put in place, and leveraging those during these challenging times. What about corporates? What role can businesses play in helping build infrastructure that, maybe there's a win-win there? You had any response there, either before COVID or since it's come about?
Yes, actually, one that comes to mind is the local BIAs. So we've worked a lot with business improvement areas on street transformation projects, and BIAs are amazing partners to work with because they really understand the importance of creating an attractive pedestrian experience and the importance that that has on local businesses on main streets. So we've done great projects with BIAs in the past, and despite the huge financial impact that COVID is having on local businesses, we've actually been approached by BIAs to do some work right now because they are. It's more important than ever for them to create an attractive space for people to be able to use to go to their local business, be a customer at their local businesses in the midst of the pandemic. So I think we've seen some really interesting responses of opening up patios outside. I think it's lovely to see that businesses are activating their street fronts a lot more. You see them coming up to the street, which is really great from a perspective of creating a pleasant pedestrian experience and encouraging walkability in those neighborhoods. So I'm encouraged by that as well. Despite the huge financial pressures, businesses and business owners recognize the importance of creating great streets that work for their customer base.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's not easy being a small business owner anywhere in the world right now. But let's hope we can all come together, support our local businesses, our small businesses, and make sure we get through this in the best way possible. Do you know what? I didn't look up at the clock for about the last 10, 15 minutes. I realized we've gone a little longer than anticipated. So I'm going to finish off with the question that we ask everybody. And first off, I want to say thank you because, Amanda, I do love what you guys do. I am so supportive of building healthier cities, healthier communities, greater infrastructure that helps people connect. And I really do believe that the work you're doing is essential as we move forward and we get people back out of their homes post-pandemic, unfortunately, the winter that we're going into, and based on where the numbers are going, probably another lockdown of some shape or form. So it's going to be critical to find the ways to get people back out there. But the last question we ask everybody is, Amanda, when this is all over, how are you going to celebrate, your opportunity to get back and get connected with other people?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think, I've been very fortunate, as I said, to be able to have family with me in close quarters. I think one of the things I've been really missing is my work colleagues, my team, my amazing team that we just love working together. And I think we could not pull off the projects that we did in 2019 without a real commitment. And I just, the announcement like yesterday with winning an award, we literally just over Zoom were like, yay, great. I couldn't give them a hug. I couldn't, congratulate them personally on the amazing work that they did. So I'm really looking forward to the day where I get to hug all of my colleagues and say thank you so much for their continued commitment to the work of 880 Cities.
It's a beautiful response because I think in an organization with such a clear purpose in helping create those human connections that make us happier and healthier, I can see why there's enthusiasm every day you walk into the four walls of 880 Cities. So where can people find out more about 880 Cities or get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, 880cities.org, and you can contact me. I'm listed there on the website. My email is my name at 880cities.org, but it's all there on the website. We also are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so you can find us there at 880.
All those wonderful platforms that take our time up so that we can't get out to the social infrastructure. But we can find out about the events that you're hosting, so that's an important use of those platforms. Amanda, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing the story of 880 Cities. And obviously, you're very passionate about what you do. I think it's a huge compliment to you and the team. And I really do look forward to keeping in touch, to seeing the work that you do coming out of COVID, because as I say, I think it's more important than ever before that we bring people together and I'll use the word heal the society that we're in so that we can get to the other side in a world where everybody gets a chance to have a positive experience in the world that we're living in. So thank you very much for your time today, and I'll look forward to being in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Pete, and thanks, Genwell. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. Cheers. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.